All right, you guys. So I did say last week on Foolishness Friday that I'm going to give my opinion on abortion. But before I do that, I want to go over a bit of history and things that are not common knowledge about abortion and just the history of Planned Parenthood. So I want you all to take a look at a story from a former director, I believe, of Planned Parenthood and her take on it and her experiences as she worked for this company. We're going to talk about history, we're going to dive deep, and then I'm going to give my opinion towards the end of this video. So I thank you all for watching and try to stay tuned for the entire thing because you may find out some things that you didn't know. Let's get into it. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
In 2009, things had started changing for me. In 2009, we were building the largest, it's operating now, the largest abortion facility in the Western Hemisphere in Houston, Texas. And I had an office in that building that was going to be opened. And I found out in January that we were going to be performing abortions in the third trimester. And that was a problem for me because of my strict morals. But that was a problem for me because I believed that, you know, if a baby could survive on its own outside of the womb, then certainly that was not okay to take its life. It was viability for me. And one day I was reading a very scientific article in People magazine, and I learned about this baby who stopped growing at 20 weeks and 6 days, and she was born and she was healthy, and now she's like 12 years old, or I don't know. But anyway, and I thought, okay, well, now I've got to move my viability line back, right? Because it was at 24 weeks and now it's at 20 weeks and 6 days. And in January, they announced to us we were going to be doing abortions in the third trimester, and that was problematic for me. And I think that was the first time I ever came home. I came home from that meeting. I think it was the first time I ever looked at my husband and said, I'm not sure that I'm going to be retiring with Planned Parenthood, because that was my goal. That's what I wanted. And you know what they called those of us that were on the retirement plan? Lifers. They probably changed the name now, but anyway. So that's what I thought I was going to do. And then April of 2009, I was awarded Planned Parenthood's Employee of the Year for 2008. And that was really exciting for me. I know you're all very proud of me. Thank you. And I got to go to their annual fundraiser, and I got to sit at the table with Hillary Clinton. Don't be jealous. And we had a very intimate conversation, me, Hillary, and 10 Secret Servicemen. And so that was good. So, you know, then I was kind of like, all right, well, you know, I was disappointed in January to find out we were going to be doing third trimester abortion, but okay, this was fun, you know, and so maybe I can just keep it up. You know, I can just keep doing this. And then August of 2009, I had a meeting with my supervisor, and we were going over my budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And she told me that that they were imposing an abortion clinic quota, and by the way, we were going to be expected to double the amount of abortions that we had provided the previous year. And that didn't make sense to me because at Planned Parenthood, we are about preventing the need for abortion. We are about reducing the number of abortions. So why in the world would we be doubling this abortion quota? It doesn't make any sense. So I said something to my supervisor, and she looked at me and she laughed. And she said, why would we reduce the abortion number, Abby? That's how we make our money. And I thought, well, okay, this is an interesting turn of events for me. I don't know where I'm going to go from here, but I've been thinking about it for about a month. And September of 2009, we had a visiting physician come in from out of town, and he had a private practice abortion facility in Austin. And he was explaining to me one time at the clinic that inside of his own private practice abortion facility that he used an ultrasound because he was explaining, shockingly enough, that it's actually safer if a doctor can see what he's doing while he's performing surgery. And I'd never thought about this. I just want to make it clear, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not even a medical assistant. I have no medical authority or education. I'm a licensed therapist. So if you're having a crummy day, we can talk about it, but if you need any sort of medical procedure, I'm really not your gal. But inside of the abortion industry, they don't care. You just have to be willing and sit through an in-house training session, and then they set you loose to perform invasive medical procedures on women. And I had gone through that training. So the only thing I knew about abortion was what Planned Parenthood had told me. I only knew their protocols. Me, as a non-medical staff person and the director of that clinic, supervised doctors. I supervised nurses. And so I didn't even know that they did abortions using ultrasound guidance. That was totally new to me. He told me that, Planned Parenthood didn't do it because it takes a little bit of extra time when you're using an ultrasound during the abortion. Our goal at Planned Parenthood was to get a woman on the table and off the table in 5 minutes. And so to introduce an ultrasound during that would take an extra, 3 to 5 minutes. And, we were trying to do 30 to 50 abortions a day. So, you just don't have that extra 3 to 5 minutes per patient. But this doctor told me that it would be interesting for me to see it. It would be a good learning opportunity, educational opportunity for me. And so he said if time permitted that he would show me what this looked like. Legs, fingers and toes, heartbeat, brain waves, internal organs. Yeah, everything's there. Outside the womb, the baby's about this big. And we can even tell if it's a boy or a girl at that point. Now, I knew that. I knew what the aftermath of abortion looked like because I had been a POC technician. What does POC stand for? Products of conception. You guys are so smart. What is that? That's the baby, right? You can say baby inside of the abortion clinic. So we said POC or POC, or if the staff was feeling funny, they said it stood for pieces of children. And inside of every abortion clinic across the country, there is someone tasked to be the POC technician. And our job is to take everything that's suctioned out of the uterus, dump it into a glass baking dish, reassemble the parts to ensure that we got everything during the abortion. I did that. I can't really explain to you how I was able to do that job and not be bothered. When you are experiencing that sort of evil, see, the evil of abortion, it's actually very tangible. See, I could see that evil when I piece those parts back together, right? I could feel it when I would manipulate the parts of those babies. Abortion has a very distinct smell. I could smell it. And when evil that real infiltrates your heart and your head, the only thing I can say is that it can literally blind you to the truth that's right in front of you. And our answer was no, the fetus has no sensory development or does not feel anything for 28 weeks. Now, do you believe that? No. Well, I did. I knew better. I knew it was a lie. I mean, I had to believe the lie because the truth was really inconvenient for me. You know why 28 weeks? Because Planned Parenthood doesn't do abortions past 28 weeks. I was reciting the scripted answer over and over again in my head, and I watched as the cannula, the suction tube, the suction wasn't turned on yet. I watched it go into the woman's uterus, and I watched it go right up next to the side of this little boy, and as it touched his side, he jumped. And he began flailing his arms and legs as if he was trying to move away from the abortion instrument, but there was nowhere for him to go. And the doctor asked the technician to turn on the suction machine, and he said, "Beam me up, Scotty." And the suction was turned on, and I guess people think that what I saw next was the worst part, and it was bad. What I saw next was bad. I saw pieces of this child being suctioned into the tube one at a time. And you know how on an x-ray, bones are white? You know, like cartilage is white on an x-ray? Well, the very last thing I saw on that ultrasound screen was this little white, perfectly formed backbone. And I saw it twirling around inside the mother's womb, and then it finally went into the tube, and the screen was just black. And I knew that the abortion was complete. Abortion is the only procedure I can think of where its success is determined by taking the life of another person.
I wanted to show this clip because I felt like we all need a glimpse of what is actually happening in this procedure. This young lady worked for Planned Parenthood, so you're getting it right from the horse's mouth. She witnessed it, and it's a reason why she left. We say how many reasons or why abortion is necessary, but we still have to call a spade a spade. It's our body, our choice, but what's inside of your body? What about their choice? It's other alternatives other than abortion. And I do want to get into that in this video. But let's first talk about the history of abortion, how it became, what it stood for, and who was the founder of Planned Parenthood. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about it.
Let's start right there with the legacy of Margaret Sanger. For people not familiar with the term eugenics, what exactly is it?
The eugenics movement divided people up into either the so-called fit or unfit based on their genetic health and capability. And Sanger completely bought into that movement. It really had its heyday between the 19-teens and really up through World War II. And she was an active part of that movement.
What are some of the views that Sanger espoused when it came to race?
Yeah, with race, it's a little more complicated. Not all eugenicists were racist, and it's really, we don't have a lot of, I think, absolutely clear evidence. Some people think she definitely was a racist. I'm inclined to think she probably wasn't, but it's very clear that she was a eugenicist. And so that means that she considered as unfit people who were poor, people who had physical disabilities or mental or cognitive disabilities, and she considered those people to be, she said at one point, they're like weeds that they shouldn't reproduce. And she considered her work in promoting birth control to be part of promoting a eugenic vision.
I know the board chair of Planned Parenthood of Greater New York said in a statement that removing Sanger's name actually acknowledges, quote, Planned Parenthood's contributions to historical reproductive harm within communities of color, end quote. What do you know about Planned Parenthood's history in that respect and its impact today on communities of color, especially the African American community?
Yeah, one of the things Planned Parenthood said today is that this is long overdue. And that, I think, maybe is the only thing that I've ever agreed with Planned Parenthood about on anything. This is long overdue because Sanger wove into the fabric of Planned Parenthood this eugenic idea that we can just decide that some people should not have children for their benefit and for the benefit of society, and that somehow that's something we get to decide. And the way this cashes out concretely with Planned Parenthood is that you see that they have more clinics in poorer neighborhoods and economically disadvantaged areas. They've said in publications in the past that their target population are people who are impoverished, and that also includes obviously racial minorities. They are much more present in minority neighborhoods than they are in white neighborhoods. And so I think we see concretely how this eugenic worldview of Sanger's that she wove into the fabric of Planned Parenthood, how that cashes out today.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective with us. We really appreciate it. Dr. Angela Franks, thank
I
you
did
again.
want to point out that she said the founder of Planned Parenthood wasn't necessarily a racist, or that they didn't have any concrete evidence of that. But also in the same breath say that she made sure that the majority of the Planned Parenthood facilities were in areas of poverty. So I don't think that's a coincidence, but let's get into the next clip.
But one thing they don't talk about is the racism behind her fight to legalize abortion. A group of African American leaders want to focus attention on her ideology and how it affected black birth rates. Abigail Robertson has more on this story.
Margaret Sanger strived for a society that limited births to only those she deemed fit to have children.
Well, I think the greatest sin in the world is bringing children into the world that have disease from their parents, that have no chance in the world to be a human being, practically. Delinquents, prisoners, all sorts of things just marked when they're born. That, to me, is the greatest sin.
Many pro-choice advocates see her as a hero, but critics call her a racist eugenics promoter who targeted black communities with her Planned Parenthood clinics.
Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, once said, colored people are like weeds, they need to be exterminated.
People don't understand that 79% of Planned Parenthood clinics are located in minority communities, and that minority communities shoulder a disproportionate amount of abortion.
Dr. King says while African Americans make up only 13% of the U.S. population, over 30% of aborted babies are from black mothers.
Under the veil of secrecy and deception, 60+ million babies have not been born because they were aborted legally since '73. 1/3 of that population belong to the African American community.
Planned Parenthood recently celebrated its 100th anniversary, prompting pro-life leaders to unite under the banner 100 No More to educate the public on the harmful impact Planned Parenthood has had on the African American community. 100 No More hope rallies like this one in Washington spread across the country to enlighten people about Sanger and her tragic legacy.
I have a real serious concern about the number of abortions that's taking place in the minority community, particularly the black community, and that I see this as a form of genocide. That is something we need to take a serious look at.
Planned Parenthood receives around $500 million each year from taxpayers.
96% of the time, if a pregnant woman walks into their clinic, that she will have an abortion.
Pro-life advocates want Congress to move that money to women's clinics that do not perform abortions.
They outnumber already around the country Planned Parenthood clinics 20-1. They truly help poor women. They truly care for the least of these, but they don't do abortions.
It's not just your body, your health, your mental state that you're affecting. You're affecting the birth rate. You're affecting your race continuing on as a whole. You're basically feeding into exactly what the founder of Planned Parenthood wanted. Not only that, it's an attack of the enemy for you to have that selfish mentality. I don't care about anybody but myself. It's my body. It's my choice. And you're pushing that narrative out for everybody to see. I don't care enough about this unborn child to see what other avenues I can take so that they can live a life that they were destined to live. I laid up. I had this child. And even if you didn't make that choice to lay up and have that child, what's done is done. And I'm sorry that that may have happened to those of you that didn't have that choice. But why take the choice of taking someone's life? Think about it. Someone did something to you that doesn't make, it's like two wrongs don't make a right. But let's go ahead and get into more about the founder of Planned Parenthood, her opinions and views, and her as a whole.
Her eugenics colleague, Dr. Clarence Gamble, a member of the Birth Control Federation of America, in regards to setting up the Negro Project, a birth control clinic for African Americans.
She was speaking about serving what she called the Negro population, and in concluding this portion of the letter, she stated that we do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members.
Sanger believed that having an African American minister on staff would ease the suspicion.
African American populations were considered some of these unfit members that should be weeded out. So in this letter, she discusses having African Americans serve other African Americans so they wouldn't be aware that they were seeking to terminate them, to exterminate them by the use of birth control and negative eugenics.
If you doubt that there's some eugenics behind it, just take your own survey. In my hometown, when you go out and look for the Planned Parenthood, you have to drive to certain neighborhoods to find those clinics. There's a reason that they place them geographically there, so that they're in walking distance. Do that same test in your hometown, and then take a look at, well, where do they geographically locate these clinics? And then you've got to start asking the question, why?
Well, CBN is launching a new prayer initiative, and part of that prayer is seeing some of this change.
You look at
country.
what's going on in America today, and you look at the drive, and it's a just drive for equality in America.
Yes.
And, you know, look at this past story. What would America look like today if 20 million African American babies had not been aborted? Well, how far along would we be to racial equality? We've got COVID-19. There are locust swarms. There are hurricanes that are being threatened. Our economy's in shambles. We're so politically divided, we can't even talk to each other. Let me underline that one. We can't have a conversation. We have to shout at one another. And we have to try to outshout one another. We need to pray. We need to have God come in and bring
alive and
bring
well
peace
throughout today's abortion industry.
Look at the maps. See where the abortion facilities are. They are near places where people are marginalized, people are poor, people are minority, and that's their target market.
Generation after generation,
we have built a better world for our daughters.
You cannot question Planned Parenthood.
In 1997, Stephen Mosher of the Population Research Institute wrote about the push to repackage Margaret Sanger in the Wall Street Journal.
The reason I call it the repackaging of Margaret Sanger is because after the Nazi regime destroyed the legitimacy of eugenics forever, they then went back and said, oh, she was just an early feminist. She was just an early supporter of family planning. No, she wasn't. Now, she was a supporter of giving IQ tests to people. She was in favor of using those IQ tests to determine who should be sterilized and who should have children.
Those inside the abortion industry are trained to overlook Sanger's racist views.
They give you an answer like, well, I mean, yes, Margaret Sanger was a racist, but everybody was a racist back then. You accept it because she is your hero.
Hayden Ludwig, an investigative researcher, has extensively studied Sanger's life and writings.
She talked about the need for race betterment through controlling these weeds, basically undesirable people.
In 1939, after opening another clinic in Harlem, the birth control activist launched the Negro Project, an initiative supported by Black leaders, such as civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois. Critics claim the program used the pretense of better health and family planning for poor Blacks in the South as an attempt to limit the Black race. Ludwig says some on the left grapple with Sanger's past and how to interpret her legacy.
They know when she writes about human weeds, they know that it's repulsive. They know it's disgusting. The left will never abandon Margaret Sanger because if they do, she's the foundation of so many of their views.
Sanger once shared her vision for a preferred race at a women's branch of the Ku Klux Klan, writing in her autobiography,
"Always, to me, any aroused group was a good group."
Of different races and classes. She often wrote about the issue in the journal she founded, called the Birth Control Review. In 1919, writing,
"I personally believe in the sterilization of the feeble-minded, the insane, and the syphilitic. The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective."
Many point to a 1923 New York Times interview as proof of Sanger's racist motives, in which she referred to people as weeds, saying,
"It means the release and cultivation of the better racial elements in our society and the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extirpation of defective stocks, those human weeds which threaten the blooming of the finest flowers of American civilization."
You know, everything that glitters isn't gold. It may seem like an easy out or a no-brainer to a difficult situation, but sometimes you got to look deeper into things and realize that it may not be what it seems. Some things are genuinely bigger than me, and my decision may affect millions. Don't think so little of yourself. I don't know about you all, but I've been in binds and I've been in situations not as serious as this, but I was wondering how I was going to get taken care of. I was wondering how it was going to get resolved, and miraculously, it always did. Ask any single mother how they were able to accomplish what they accomplished, but they did. Have faith in yourself and know that you can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. And if you're not religious, find something that keeps you going. Find something that gives you strength to do the impossible. And if you feel like, oh, this would just be an easy out, or this is just something I have to do, know that you're capable of anything you put your mind to. Finally, I just want you all to watch this last clip, and then I'm going to give my opinion of abortion as a whole. I think from this video, if you watch the entirety of it, thank you so much. But I think from this video, you can probably tell my viewpoint. But let's get into it.
As we tell the history of Planned Parenthood's founding, we must fully take responsibility for the harm that Sanger caused to generations of people with disabilities and Black, Latino, Asian American, and Indigenous people. Joining us now is Reverend Dean Nelson, Executive Director of Human Coalition Action. Reverend Nelson, welcome back. Great to see you. First off, what was your reaction when you read that article? What did you think? And its admission by the head of Planned Parenthood.
On the one hand, I was shocked because for decades, many pro-life leaders have been decrying the eugenic practices of its founder, Margaret Sanger. But I was happy to see that they acknowledged the reality of what their history is. But at the same time, I know quite honestly that the real problem is you cannot acknowledge that history without also acknowledging the fact that Planned Parenthood strategically has placed 80% of their surgical abortion facilities in minority communities.
Yeah, and I know that you've been quite vocal about Margaret Sanger, as you mentioned, many pro-life organizations as well. What role do you think that played, if any, in getting Planned Parenthood to come to grips, so to speak, with their founder's history? And why do you think they spoke up now?
That's a great question. I do believe that the effort that we did last year with over 120 Black leaders signing on to a document calling for Planned Parenthood to deal with its racist past. I'm not certain why right now. I know that there's continued pressure within this, Black Lives Matter, moment in America. So I believe that there's a lot of pressure that they're receiving. But the reality is that Planned Parenthood, it should not continue to operate as they have. Their name suggests that they parent, but they don't empower women to parent. What they do is they sell abortions, and we want to help those around the country to know that there are better alternatives, like what we do at Human Coalition by providing free services to women who find themselves in this difficult situation.
And Reverend, for those who may not be all that familiar, can you talk a little bit more about Margaret Sanger?
Sure. Many people may not know, at the beginning of the 1900s, Margaret Sanger began to open up birth control facilities, particularly in New York City. As the organization would grow, it would become, the name of it would ultimately become Planned Parenthood. Some people are unaware that in 1939, she wrote a letter to Clarence Gamble of the Procter and Gamble fortune, stating that we don't want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And she would use a strategy that they would refer to as the Negro Project, where they would appeal to blacks through ministers to try to help encourage them to reduce their numbers. And so, what we're trying to do is to bring light to the fact that Planned Parenthood is the largest abortion provider in the country. And while nationally abortion numbers continue to decrease, Planned Parenthood's abortion numbers continue to increase because it's part of their business model. And Margaret Sanger is the founder of this organization.
And Reverend, what's next for the pro-life movement to raise even more awareness about Planned Parenthood?
Yeah, what we are working on in cities across the country with other pro-life organizations is not just decrying the real truth about Planned Parenthood, but also elevating solutions. In the state of Texas, for instance, we are pushing legislation like EMMA, which is Every Mother Matters Act, and we would love to see these type of alternatives that are embraced by Republicans and by Democrats in certain states to really provide real solutions. 75% of the women that we engage with say that they would choose life if their circumstances were different. And so we're trying to elevate legislation and ideas that provide real alternatives for women, and that's what Human Coalition does day in and day out with over 100,000 women that we will engage each year.
Reverend, we have probably about 30 seconds left, not a whole lot of time, but wondering if you have any final thoughts or anything that you feel is important for our viewers to know.
We just want them to remember that Planned Parenthood is not an organization that is focused on parenting. They don't empower women to do that. What they do is they sell abortions, and we want to encourage people of all goodwill and faith to help us to get that message out, whether it's in Black, Latino, or white communities, that there are other alternatives for women who are facing these difficult challenges of abortion. And so we want people to recognize that, and they can feel free to visit us at Human Coalition's website to find out more information.
Finally, I just want to let everyone know that watch this video. I thank you all for watching. And now, as I promised, I am going to say my opinion on abortion. Personally, I feel like it is wrong. I like to call a thing a thing. At the end of the day, it's murder. Now, I understand if you're watching this video and you have already had an abortion, or if you're thinking about an abortion, I understand, and I'm not judging you. But we all make mistakes. We've all done things that we're not proud of. And in the future, I may do things that I'm not proud of. But I want everyone that's watching this video to see what you're doing and have a little bit more insight on what it is that you're doing. So maybe this might change your opinion or outlook on this situation or the people that we deem pro-life. So once again, I'm not fond of it. I'm not a fan of it, and I don't think that it is right. Now, again, you can believe whatever you want to believe. You can have whatever opinion you want to have, because at the end of the day, God gave us a choice, and I choose pro-life. Thank you all for watching. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button because you know you want to, and it helps my channel grow. Notification bells to be notified whenever I drop new content. Comment, subscribe. Love you guys, and I'll see you all for the next video. Bye.